Hey everybody, Kate here. It is 10:15 Pacific. It is time to dig into your hips and get them feeling and moving as good as Shakira's probably do. I jokingly said she'll be on the Facebook Live today. I'm just kidding. She will not. She does know a lot about hips, I think, based on that song from like 20 years ago. So all of the teenagers watching this are like, who? What? I know. I start getting dated in my references, and that is crazy and scary. Because when I mention Jane Fonda and a 20-year-old goes, who? I go, oh, I'm getting older. Weird. Okay, what's up? As I said, today we are talking hip stability and of course also hip mobility along with that, and hip strength too. Last week we were talking about strong glutes. Next week we're going to be talking about strong torso. These three sections of your body are so intimately connected, it's really difficult to separate them. We're going to do our best to do that today, but also you'll notice that there are fibers that kind of run towards like, well, your torso has to do this in order for your hips to do that. And you'll see that as we go through. So like last week, I'm going to encourage you to watch the strong glutes post from last week, and next week make sure you catch these strong torso posts as well. Okay, so let's dig into hips, shall we? And yes, we are ending with a joke today, as always, especially because it's a Friday, but we do that any day of the week. Hips. They're a bugger for a lot of people, aren't they? And they really take a lot of the blame, much like I was talking about the piriformis muscle last week, taking so much of the blame for the pain that we feel in our butt when we develop sciatic nerve pain or glute pain or anything like that. The hips are like chronically blamed for so many things. And not that they're not to blame, but remember, your body's always responding to these signals that it's getting. So what's happening that makes everyone's hips feel so tight and so in pain? And if we all took a show of hands of everybody who ends up watching this over the next 24 hours, my guess is the vast majority will have said, yes, I have had hip pain sometime in the last year of my life. A big part of that is, yes, we sit so much during our day. Yes, definitely. But also too, even if you have a standing desk or even a slightly active job, the reality is you're not moving very much during your day. And that is a large component of why our hips don't function very well, because remember this. If you don't use it, you don't keep it. Your body is very wise, and it knows that if it's going to have to conserve resources, because it does, because there's only so many resources to go around, it's not going to maintain things that you're not using on a regular basis. And if you're not actually taking your hips through a really wide, expansive array of movement on a regular basis, why would they maintain their ability to do that? They wouldn't, of course. And you might think, well, I actually do move my hips a lot. I deadlift and I lunge and I chase after kids, or I coach a sports team, or I do my own activities. I do dance. I do all these other things. Yes, but if you look at the entire scheme of all of those movements, you're still not moving your hips very much. I would go on a limb and say that. Very few actually move their hips very much unless they intentionally are going into those positions and then training themselves how to do it. And so hip mobility and stability and strength, I think, is one of the most foundational things you need to be spending your time doing. And that's why it's one of the pillars of the Unbreakable Body. There are 6 pillars in the Unbreakable Body program that I've created. And that's why it's one of the components of it. And it's crucial to the rest of your body feeling and functioning well. Number one, because it just stinks to have hip pain. It makes it hard to do everything. But number two, hips are so intimately tied into like how the knees function and feel and how your ankles function and feel. And like your hip on one side works with how the shoulder functions on the opposite side. Think of how you walk. You take a step with your left foot and your right arm swings forward, right? So your hip and your shoulder on the opposite side are also intimately connected. So what is being influenced down in the hip can also manifest up in the shoulder. And so some of you may be having a light bulb moment going, oh yeah, it's always my left hip and my right shoulder. Oh, interesting. It could be a matter of compensating something like your gait pattern because your hip doesn't actually move as well as it can. And that is why too, it is really great to get with a coach to get an evaluation of how your body is functioning, and why when people do the Unbreakable Body program, they start with a self-assessment so that we actually can figure out where their pillars are at and then move them forward over a period of 12 weeks and beyond. Okay, so there's like essentially 5 things I want you to know about your hips today, because this also is a topic we could go on and on and on and on and on all day for. And in fact, when I'm hosting the Chicago workshop for Unbreakable Body Series at CrossFit Turbine coming up in September, we have 4 hours devoted to just the glutes, the hips, and the torso. So we could go on and on, but I thought I'd try to condense it down to just a few things that are the most important. And I am going to show you 2 drills today so that you can kind of dig in and see like what's going on with your hips. Okay. So first, You will not have mobility if you don't have stability, and you will not have stability if you don't have mobility. So those two are very intimately connected to each other. And many people will say, oh, I actually have great hip stability. I'm very stable in my hips, but they're also missing a significant portion of their mobility in their hips. And I like to look at that more as like a false sense of stability for their body. So we've talked about this in previous Facebook Lives. The tone or the tension that is in a muscle. When you have high tonicity in a muscle, it's not necessarily because it's strong and stable. It could be because it has had extra neural drive sent to that area as a protective mechanism. Remember that neural drive is your nervous system, so brain, spinal cord, nerves, signaling to a muscle to fire. For example, I was just hanging out with a friend at the climbing gym this morning who's been going through some health things, and they actually lost the ability to innervate the bicep tendon and the bicep musculature. And so literally they'll go like this and nothing happens in their bicep. That's neural drive, or lack thereof in that case. So a high tone in your muscle could be that you've sent a lot of neural drive to that area. That can happen as a protective mechanism because remember, muscles are often safer when they're shorter because there's less work to be done, less angle to control, and less for risk to come in versus like a long, fully lengthened muscle that has lots and lots of room to lengthen and fully contract. So sometimes when we don't have great hip mobility and great hip control, we'll actually increase the neural drive to the tissues in the hip to protect that area. And you're not consciously doing it. It's happening on a subconscious kind of automatic level. But that's why when you're training in the gym or at home, that's your conscious controlled environment to address these things consciously, so that when you get into the unconscious, uncontrolled environment of the real world, you don't have to stop and think every time, because that just is not how it'll work. You'll just respond with whatever signal you have. So mobility and stability are intimately connected. You have to have one without the other, and you have to have the other to have the first one. So the two are super, super, super connected. So, okay. Great. Does that mean we should do a lot of like hip stretching and standing on one leg to do balance drills? No, which brings me to point 2. So passive stretching is not going to get you there. Hip openers that are simply passive stretches, not happening. Sorry. So that's the reality of how our body functions. Just holding a passive stretch doesn't actually teach the nervous system and the rest of your body, but the nervous system runs the whole thing. So that's really who's in charge here. Doesn't teach it how to actually control that stretch you've been in. So you may see like a classic like hip stretch where like, you like push here and you can feel all this stretch like through your inner thigh and in through your groin. Great if you hold that passively, but where is any signal that tells your brain and your nervous system and your body how to actually handle that joint, so your hip joint, in that new position? A passive stretch doesn't do that at all. So just doing passive stretching is not going to get you there. And just using your foam roller or your lacrosse ball or a massage therapist's hands also isn't going to get you there. Because again, you have to get on board, meaning you, the nervous system, the you who's in here running the show, has to get on board with the changes that are happening in your body. So you do not get to be a passive passenger on this journey. How interesting is that? Weird. We have to actually play a role in how our body is changing, and we actually have to show up for the stuff that's happening. So it's not like you're going to go, okay, I'm going to hold a passive stretch and I'm going to be here. I'm going to be here now. I'm going to be attentive. No, it's not that, although that's also really good. It's learning, and this is why I'm an FRC practitioner for coaching, and why FR practitioners for manual therapy and other FRC coaches, why it's really great to get with somebody like that to learn some education for how to train your body better. Because if you don't understand how to use the combination of positional stretching, isometric loading, and then working with the neural drive of your nervous system, you're not actually going to learn how to change the mobility of a joint. So what we need to do is totally change the way we look at mobility training and start actually seeing it as training. Like not mobility training that you do before your workout. No, it's training, period. My like shoulder and hip and torso work for my mobility is hard, and it is strength training for me, like how all of us consider strength training. Like I'm focused and I'm working on, I'm attentive. That is my workout. And so if you've never experienced something like that, I would strongly encourage you to get an experience of actual mobility training, which is chop off the mobility. Yes, it makes you more mobile. It's training. It's training your body. It's not something you do before you go bench. It's not something you do before you go lunge. If you're serious about actually changing your mobility, you have to be a very attentive participant in the process, meaning you have to give a lot of energy and a lot of focus and a lot of mental focus to what's happening in the process. It's not something you can do before you go do squats and deadlifts. You'll do those on a different day. Okay, so that's number 2. We really need to actually develop some proper mobility. And if you're just doing passive stretching or using your foam roller, sorry, homie, that's not a hip opener. It's not going to actually change how your body functions. And if you never knew that, that's okay. I didn't know that either years ago. I would go, yeah, let's stretch for half an hour. Cool. We increased our mobility. No, we didn't. We didn't actually increase it in a way that is usable for the long haul. Okay. So part 3 then, what do we do? So how do we actually increase our hip mobility and our hip stability and our hip strength for the long haul? So one thing that you absolutely need to do is learn to control your hip in its entire range of motion. Most of us can't do that until we start practicing. I'll give you a great example. So I've got my clothes hamper actually behind me here. I'm going to show you a simple little test you can do on yourself to just see how good your control is of the front of your hip. So we're going to be using things like the psoas and the iliacus and just the stuff that's on the front of your hip. We're going to use that to see how much control you have of those tissues and areas of your front of your hip in their most short position. So let me show you how it looks. Okay, so find an object. So here's my hamper. See, okay. Find an object that's an appropriate height for you. This may not be the right height for you. I don't know what your right height is, but I'll give you some cues so you can figure it out for yourself. Okay, so you're going to stand facing your object. Having something to hold on to would be awesome. I don't, because I'm next to a wall and there's nothing to hold on to, so I'll just do it without holding on. But a chair would be ideal to have something to hold on to so that your body isn't also trying to stabilize you as it tries to do this kind of challenging, neurologically challenging drill. All right. So what I'm going to do first is make sure I'm not in a posterior pelvic tilt. So a posterior pelvic tilt is where we tuck our butt under like this. And if you were to do this after taking a shower, you could see the bony landmarks of your body. You'd be able to see that you actually have a slight tip backwards if you're in a posterior tilt. Conversely, an anterior tilt is where we stick our butt out and everything kind of angles towards the floor this way. We want the happy medium between those two. Then I'm going to put my foot up onto the object. If just putting the foot on the object pulls us into a posterior tilt where the knee has to bend and the butt has to tuck under, the object's too high. You need to find an object where you can keep your knee totally straight, flexing the leg hard so it's totally straight down into the floor, and the butt is sticking up and out behind you. From there, hands on the object or whatever. I'm going to do hands on hips just so that I feel nice in control here. And then I want you to lift your leg as high as you can off the object, keeping your knee flexed, and hold it there. And then bring it back down. Now, see if you can actually do that and not have a cramp happen in the front of your hip. Can you actually hold it there, or do you lift it and it falls right back down? And then compare that to that hip stretching where you either stand or you lay down and you'll pull your knee to your chest as far as you can. How come you can't pull it up that far under your own power? That's an interesting question to answer. And that answer to that question is you don't have control over that. So it's all well and good if you want to do this like a passive, we do this before we warm up. You've seen that one, right? Everyone does that. You pull your knee up. You can even do that laying down on the floor. It's not that that's a bad stretch, but it's interesting to note you can pull yourself into that stretch passively. You're pulling on your own power. Leg is relaxed. When you try to lift your leg under your own power, you can't get there. So the distance between those two is a problem that you want to start closing the gap on to actually develop better control of the entire range of your hip. Does that make sense? And also, I forgot to say when we started today, if you have questions about your hips or anything else, you can drop them in the comments. We'll do them before the joke at the end today. So does that make sense? Active control versus passive range. Trying to bring those two as close together as you can so that you develop true control of your hips, not just momentum, getting through something, or ignoring the fact that your hip doesn't actually move through a position that it should be able to hold. Getting yourself to actually have the manageable control over that. That drill alone is a simple little test you can do to go, oh, I actually can't control my front of my hip in its shortened range position. That's something I could address. And you'll do the same thing for the rest of the hip joint, which it's a hip ball and socket joint, so it rotates. So you're going to have a massive amount of range that you need to explore and actually start developing control and strength in. Okay, so I was just thinking of something that I wanted to say. We're going to go on to number 4 and I'll come back to that. So being able to control yourself through an entire range. What if you go, no, my hips actually don't work that way? Okay. All right. If that's what you want to believe, that's fine. Like, guys, seriously, especially in the light of, like, at the time I'm recording this, there's been more awful things happening in the world. Life's really short and you don't know when it's going to end. And, like, get your shit together and make your body work well. I get a little emotional because I actually just saw a friend today who's, like I said, dealing with some health challenges, and that's like, oof, it's like a reminder that life is short. Get your shit together. Your body is not limited by, like, oh, it just can't. No, it's not. That is your self-imposed limitation. Like, make it so that you can have the life that you want to have and hang out with the people you want to hang out with and go do all the things you want to do, because you don't freaking know when it's going to end. So, like, God, this is why I do what I do. And I get, like, I legit in my core, like, I'm passionate about it. And I also get very upset because I think you don't know how long you have. Why are you putting self-imposed limitations on yourself that, oh, my hips don't go that way, or like my knees don't do that? Okay, if you think that's true, it is true for you. Great, good luck, have fun. The rest of us are gonna go, my hips don't move that way yet, but I wonder if I actually could make them move that way. And then we go explore it, right? And we go, and you know what? Even if your hips never move like how mine move, who gives a shit? They improved. They moved better than what they did before. And you went on the journey. You explored that. Like, that has far more benefit than just the physical manifestation of what your hips are doing. So to all of the moms who have kids who watch this with me, I'm sorry for swearing today, but that's the way I get really heated about it. Okay, so anyways, if you think your hips can't move that way, great, fine, good luck, have fun. The reality is they may not yet. But that doesn't mean they can't ever. Because until the day you die, your cells are regenerating. So let's say you are someone who you're like, hey, Kate, I tried that. Or I've done some of the other hip drills you've shown on YouTube or something like that. And you go, yeah, it doesn't feel good. So obviously something's not right. Awesome. Okay, good. That's a good piece of evidence you can gather. You can go, something doesn't feel right. Maybe when you do that thing I just showed you, you get like a pinching pain in the front of your hip. That's a very common one. We call that a closing angle pain because you're closing the angle of the hip and you're getting a little pain inside of it. That's actually a really good piece of data. It's not bad. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean you're broken. It's like, oh, there's something going on in there. Okay, we can do something about that. So if you're doing any of the drills I've ever shown you or that somebody else shows you, or even when you hire a coach or get a program and you get some sort of like pain in the joint, always stop and meet with a practitioner about that. I highly recommend FR practitioners because they have this incredible understanding of how tissue regenerates and how to work with that. And then also use the FRC techniques and the neural control and the strength work and all the things like what I teach too. They're really great at that. And they can actually lay hands on you, which is great. So I'm a big fan of getting with a practitioner like that, or a massage therapist or physician, whoever is in your area that you trust and that knows what they're doing with regards to working the tissue in the hip joint. Because what we don't want to have is pain in a joint. Anytime you've got pain or pinching pain in a joint, it's a sign that the joint's not clear. The tissue isn't all functional and working as well as it can. And it can take a practitioner who can do hands on you to actually help you change the quality of that tissue and then bring in with it coaching drills like what I would teach or what they might be able to teach as well. So if you're doing any of these drills and you're like, I can't, the next immediate thing you should say is, but I'm going to take this data and explore with it so that you actually can. Because I swear to God, you actually can change the quality of your hip function over the long haul, no matter if you're 20 or 50 or 70 or 85 or older. You can, all right? So if you're doing the things and you go, I can't, great, good, that's just data. Let's move along from there. So here's another one that you might go, oh, I can't do that. And maybe not in the sense of like it hurts, but like my body doesn't move that way. Guess what? You can actually teach your body to move that way. So I call these hip hikes. This is actually a drill from the Unbreakable body. And most of my coaching clients have done it over the years too, because it's an interesting drill to learn how to segment the hip from the knee and the back. All right. So I'm going to show it to you now. All right. So standing, this is the part you need to pay attention to. But I will show knees actually, because knees are important too. Okay. So my knees are right here, guys. It's hard to see with the black pants on, I know. Okay, so what we're gonna do is a hip hike. So here's where my hips are right now, okay, right there. What I'm gonna do is try to stay fairly stacked and tall, and I'm gonna hike one hip up as high as I can, and then come back down. And I'm doing that with 2 feet on the ground right now. Start with just that and see if you can find what lifts that hip up and back down, because then we're going to go to one leg, and I'm going to open this door. I'm going to hold onto the door now that I can actually pull open. Hold on to an object so that you stay nice and stable. This leg will be up in the air, and then repeat the same move again, going up as high as you can and then down as low as you can. I'm actually using this stuff inside this part of my hip and leg and butt to push my pelvis up into the air here. And as you do this, you should feel this working to help you. You should not have your knee bending to do the work, and you should not have your low back on the opposite side contracting to do this movement. If that's you, that is movement patterning that you've put in. You've somehow trained your low back area or maybe your knees to do things that your pelvis should be able to do on their own. So you would start with this and just see if you can do it on 2 feet first, and then transfer it to 1 foot. And even just doing a couple of these, I feel like a nice little burn starting to happen through here in my butt and in my hips. So that's a fun little drill you can actually do. And I'm a big fan of doing that after like a long day at a desk too, because it just kind of wakes you back up in your glutes and your hips and starts to send those little signals of like, psst, remember, we actually don't just sit, we move in all these amazing, wonderful ways. And that signal on a regular basis is how you keep your hips healthy and strong. Okay, so 5th thing I want to say today, then we're going to go to some questions. The hips stuff. You'll see a lot of like glute bridges, hamstring curls, deadlifts, lunges, squats. Where do those fit in? And I actually had a client ask me this week. Can I still do all that stuff if I've now realized I don't have great hip mobility or function or control of the entire range? The answer is it's a person-dependent thing. I would say yes, but if you know you're not actually using all the tissue that you could be using in your hips, and thereby you're using something else, maybe your quads or your hamstrings or your low back to do more of what your hips should be doing, can you still do squats and lunges? Yeah, you totally can. The question to ask is, how much of that old patterning do you want to send while you're also trying to lay down new patterning? So like when I coached endurance athletes for a long time, I was their strength coach and I worked with like endurance running coaches and worked with the client together to get them like amazing and strong and wonderful. When they were relearning how to actually fire their glutes or use their foot muscles. This fly in here, oh my gosh, look at this. This is life, right? That's life. When you're relearning how to do something, there will be the old patterning that is still in there. That's going to take time to redevelop. And you're laying down new patterning. I always say, can you give up like a week or 2 of the old patterning to just focus 100% on laying down better new patterning, taking it as a time to restore and regenerate and practice something new. It would kind of be akin to like we practice Spanish, but you never, ever have to practice it in your home, like in conversational. You only practice it when you're in the gym. How good are you actually going to get? How fast are you actually going to get good? So if you could, ideally, that would be awesome. If you took like a week or 2 to just chill out on like the squats and lunges and deadlifts and like just maybe do body weight or just play with them a little bit, but really give that time that you were doing with all that other strength work to this new stuff of learning how to actually use your hip through their entire range, learning how to actually generate control and stability that is real, not just a kind of a false sense of high tone stability, and work on actually changing the signal and the movement pattern so that in time, it becomes the default to actually make your hips work well in the way they're supposed to, and the way they were designed to originally when you first showed up on this planet. They can work that way again. So it's like a scales kind of a thing, deciding what's worth it to you, right? To me, totally, yeah, that's worth it. Like fine, leave the squats for a week. I don't care. This sounds really important and really special for me to spend some time changing and working on. And I'm also not one who likes to get frustrated. And to me, it's very frustrating when I'm doing like just enough work to start to see some progress. And then all this stuff comes up that just kind of like halts me right there for the week instead of letting me to continue to move forward. So for me, it's valuable to move away from what I was doing before in order to spend some time working on this now. Are you actually going to change your movement pattern in a week? Nope, not even close. And in fact, this is going to be like a 0.5A because I had 5 and I was going to stop at 5. But nonetheless, the reality of how long it takes to actually change tissue and change movement patterns is significant. But if as a coach, you all came to me or my dear friend Hunter Cook or any of the other coaches in the world who are awesome, amazing humans, and you said, well, I want to make my hips work better. And we were like, cool, we need 20 months. You'd be like, yeah, right. Yeah, right. Oh my gosh, no. But here's the reality. It may take that long. I don't know how long it's going to take for your hips to actually start changing how they function. It's not going to happen a week, although you will start feeling maybe some difference, and that may be placebo effect. It may not. We don't know. It doesn't matter. You still feel it. But it's going to take a long time to actually change that. I'm simply saying with my fifth point here that it may be beneficial to, in the beginning, devote yourself to working on these areas that you have now discovered kind of aren't so awesome at what they can do. Make sense? Okay. Final thing I want to say about that with regards to your hips, just holding stretching doesn't do it. Just doing strength training doesn't do it. The middle ground where everybody's missing, and we're starting to see that change now, is the neurological control of the actual hip joint. If your hip joint doesn't actually know how to hold external or internal rotation or how to move into hip extension, you're out of luck, because you actually need to internally and externally rotate your hip. Well, externally rotate, especially to walk and run, and you need to be able to internally and externally rotate to hold stability and perform squats and climb walls or whatever sport you're into. I just love climbing, so I'm super stoked on that. Neurological control. You need to get into it. I have an article on Fit for Real Life about neural control. In fact, there's a second one about foot stuff that also kind of leans into neural control too. And it's a big factor of all of the coaching that people like myself who are FRC trained or similar neural control training modalities. That's what we understand. That's what we're working on. And the change that we're seeing and how hips function is significant. So doing things like going into a position and seeing if you can actually fire, as I showed you on the hamper here, can you actually flex the muscle in that position? And you could even, if you're just going to explore on your own, go look up various neural control drills and try them out and see if you can do them. Chances are you won't be able to. The next step then is to go, do I need to be a curious consumer and go do some reading and studying? Do I need to hire a coach? Do I need to get a program? Do I need to go to a workshop? All of those things are super valuable time and money well spent when it comes to you actually feeling and moving better. Okay. All right. So, question, can you provide a link to search for FRC coaches? I cannot provide one. Feather Ridge College and Google searches. No, that's not it. Functionalrangeconditioning.com, I believe is the website. FRC, if you Google FRC and the godfather of FRC, who is a wonderful man, Dr. Andrea Spina, he is, he didn't invent all this stuff, but he was like, for me, the first person to go, this is how it all fits together. Because I had like pieces that I would like just kind of stumble upon and figure out over the years. And I was like, well, this works, but I don't really understand why. And then started seeing his work a few years ago and was like, oh, that's it. That's how that works. Oh my gosh. Okay. So anyways, he's up in Toronto normally, working as a chiropractor or something like that. And then also teaching, the functional range conditioning, certification and weekends and workshops. You can find practitioners in your area on their website. And it's not that anyone who's not that isn't good. It's just that if you are certified through that, I know what you've learned. And I go, oh yeah, yep, I would most likely vouch for you. If you know that stuff and you're using it and applying it correctly, I would totally vouch for you. Okay, thanks, Mark. I appreciate that. Ellen, should you do the drills daily? Great question. Depends on where you're starting from, right? So yes, you could, but it depends on, so things like when you're doing neural control training, there are days that you'll be using high tension strategies to really exert kind of like maximal tension throughout your body and maximal contraction in the isometric loading and in the various positions that you're getting into. You wouldn't do that every day, most likely, because we have a max capacity for what our nervous system can handle before it taps out. Not that like you'll fall down or you'll fall asleep or get sick or whatever, but you'll get sluggish and you may feel run down and you may you lose your pep because the nervous system is very much like a muscle. It has a capacity to function. And then it's like, well, we've kind of tapped that out. You could experience this like, after a long day of like manual labor in the yard, and then you kind of feel like slow and almost a little like dumb at the end of the day. Like you drop things or like you can't remember things. That's kind of a bit of the nervous system going, yeah, we're cashed out. We've worked really hard today. We've exerted a lot of effort and also a lot of mental focus. And so most likely not every day, but simple movement drills. Yes. Like readers of the Movement Manifesto get my daily movement series. It's like an 8-minute series of movements you do every day. Those are low tension. And they're meant to expand and explore the range of motion you have and start building range of motion from there. That is an everyday thing because it's sending the signal to your tissues of how you'd like them to respond. So yes. Okay. Mark, can you talk about breathing and how to match to movement in the hip car? Which hip car are we talking about? Go ahead and type that in and then let me know. Thanks, Melissa. Yes, Melissa, functional range conditioning. Thank you. If in case Mark's still here, we'll wait for him to type that in. But breathing. So breathing is really important when it comes to training and moving and functioning. Many people live up here. You can see my neck flexing as I do that. That's not how you should breathe. Your breathing should be deep in your belly and really long. And it's hard for me to do a deep breath because I'm like on when I'm here with you guys. So my nervous system is like all amped up and ready to go. But if we were in like a yoga class together, you'd take that really long, maybe up to 8-second expansion breath, really long 8-second exhale. But when you're, Melissa, you get the drills when you buy the movement manifesto. So fitforreallife.com/manifesto. I think that's the URL. Mark, the standing, bringing up, opening. Yes, okay, gotcha. So the drill Mark is showing is a drill that is kind of a fundamental drill in the FRC course and in the training. It's not that it's invented by them, but it takes you through the entire range of motion, and so we use it a lot as part of FRC training. Your breathing should be focused and controlled, but once you're in a high tension strategy, it needs to move to very shallow diaphragmatic breathing, because you're focusing so hard as you go through. We don't want to create false stability by doing a Valsalva maneuver, which is like a form of like forcing breath and then holding your breath. You don't want to do that. You also don't want to be able to breathe fully and smoothly and deeply because you're holding a lot of high tension in your diaphragm and in your lower torso and using that to create a complete contraction in your body. Okay? Hope that helps. Okay. Are you ready for a joke? I am. This joke was sent in by a viewer and reader. You guys, like life mission unlocked. People send me jokes because they know I'll enjoy them and they're never good, but that's okay. We're going to tell them anyways. So Irina, thank you. We're going to be telling your joke today. I'm going to try to do my best to honor it. Okay, so here's Irina's joke. So, and I'm going to embellish it a little bit, okay? So just to put my own little flair on it. All right, so there... So in Silicon Valley, there was a meeting of all of the computer bugs. Like they're all nerds who are really into computers. In fact, they're called the Computer Nerds of Silicon Valley Bugs Edition. So they know, they're like, yep, we're in on this. So there's like gnats and spiders and cockroaches and the fly that was flying around in here, right? So they're all meeting for their Silicon Valley Computer Bug Society meeting of the month. And the first thing that always happens is the head cockroach kind of goes around and asks everybody how they're doing, what they've been working on. So the head cockroach does that and he turns to the spider and he says, Mr. Spider, tell us what you've been working on. Anything new? And the spider goes, no, nothing new. I've just been on the web. It's terrible. It's terrible. Spider web, right? More, I think it's adorable that little bugs would have a meeting about computers. Let's just be clear, that's more adorable. But nonetheless, Irina, thank you so much for sending in your joke today. You guys, I hope you have an awesome rest of your day and your weekend. Thank you so much for sharing all this stuff with other people. I see you sharing this with your friends all the time on Facebook, and I can't thank you enough because I swear to you, the world is going to be a better place when more of us move better and own our bodies and own our movement and own our capacity. And I can't thank you enough for helping me and my mission to do that and for being a part of it with me. Me and the fly that are buzzing around are saying, have a great day. Take it easy, you guys.